Today on Remington's Inside the Industry, we're headed to Africa for an eye-opening, conservation-heavy discussion with my good friend Wicus Diedricks. Wicus is a professional hunter as well as the owner and operator of one of South Africa's most successful hunter-based conservation success stories. Today we will take a truthful look into the realities facing Africa's wildlife, in particular the rhino, as we visit with one of the continent's true hunter conservationists. This podcast is brought to you by Remington Firearms. For more information on the new era of Remington, visit our site at remarms.com. Okay, Wicus. Today I've got Wicus Diedricks. I hope I've got that right. Diedricks or Diedricks?
Diedricks. Yes, we've got it right.
Okay, perfect. Pardon me, excuse me. Of Rockwood Conservation. Diedrick and I become friends because I was hunting there a week ago. I had a wonderful time, but I wanted to have Wicus on the call. Pardon me, I just used your last name. I wanted to have Wicus on the call because first of all, I think, as many people know, I'm a big conservationist. I thoroughly enjoyed myself there, and one of the things I discovered was I learned a lot about rhinoceros, and I learned a lot about the conservation in South Africa, and I was just completely impressed with Rockwood Conservation and thought this would be perfect. Let's have you on the call. So welcome today, and thanks for joining me.
No, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak and to tell our story.
Well, that being said, start with a little story. You know, I'll kind of interrupt and ask questions as we go along, but you know, when I was there, you took us out to the field, you explained numerous things, and really it was pretty fascinating, and I learned all kinds of things that I didn't really know. One of the things that I really am and I believe in, and if the NGOs would listen at all, they would understand and believe in, but I don't think they're on the same page as us, is conservation. When I tell people about hunters are the greatest conservationists, their eyes glaze over if they're non-hunters because they don't believe it for a second. But I think that your operation really highlights that and shows what hunting can do for conservation. I think it's a perfect platform to kind of show that. So, and not just for conservation, but you do a lot of pretty cool stuff with the local community, etc. So tell us a little bit about it, Wicus.
All right. So I think I'll start by saying, Rockwood is a reserve basically dedicated to the conservation of white rhino or rhino in general. And I started off with land that I previously farmed cattle on. And then at some stage, I thought rewilding it and then rather having wild animals on it would be so much nicer. And then I got my first rhino from the Kruger National Park just over 10 years ago. And, I had this romantic idea that, they could just roam free on the land and, I wouldn't have to patrol them or, protect them or anything like that. But I got a rude awakening when my first rhino were poached in 2014. And then I realized, I have to do something, and it was quite a emotional experience for me. And at that stage, there was about 1,000 rhinos poached per year in South Africa, and I realized, that I should do a lot more, and that if private people don't stand up and do something, we're going to lose rhino. And we're going to lose all our rhino. Now, to put it in perspective, the Kruger National Park lost approximately 80% of their rhino since 2010. They had a population of more than 10,000, and at the last count 2 years ago, they were down to like about 1,900 rhino. So you can see, if that trend continues, there won't be any rhino left in the national parks in South Africa and in Africa. And so it's really, the responsibility of private people and individuals to make a difference. Now,
but sorry for interrupting, Wicus, but
yes,
you're talking about South Africa. But what percentage of the African population of rhinos are in South Africa?
I would say 80% or maybe more. It's a difficult. We don't always have the numbers, but I would guess about 80%. Namibia and Zimbabwe's got sizable populations, but and the rest of Africa, I think makes up less than 5% of the total population of rhino in Africa.
So the reality is if South Africa loses the rhino population, the rhinoceros, for lack of a better word, pretty much becomes extinct.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at history and the history of rhino poaching, areas like Kenya and Tanzania, Zambia was hotspots 40, 50 years ago, and it basically rolled down like a wave down into the Zambezi Valley, Zimbabwe, and up to about 2010, South Africa was basically spared any rhino poaching. We had less than 10 poachings a year, and it was basically non-existent. And so as the numbers in the rest of Africa became depleted, it took off in the Kruger National Park, and as that population decreased, it rolled over into other reserves, and now more and more so on private land. So eventually we are going to become the next front line, and we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, no, that's sorry for interrupting you, but I wanted to really get that out there that when you're talking about the population, that the reality is South Africa, if they lose their rhinos, then the rhinos are gone. So sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to make sure that people heard that and understood that.
Yeah, good point here. So yes, I then realized to continue with the story. I realized that I have to do something different, and I intensified my protection. I have basically a private army of rangers. A lot of technical stuff, cameras, and we monitor the roads around the reserve, intel systems, etc. And all in all, it's quite a costly affair, to protect your rhinos, and to such an extent, that it far outweighs the actual value, the monetary value of what a rhino is worth. And we don't get subsidies, and we basically have to subsidize it from some other activities, like hunting. And so we hunt mainly to be able to protect our rhino. Now, we hunt, there's 23 different indigenous species or endemic species on the reserve, plains game, buffalo, etc. that we hunt, and we also hunt rhino, to eventually pay the bills.
So, I didn't realize. So I guess I have to come back because I think I only got 7 of the indigenous species. So I guess there's another, 14 or 15 that I better come back for. Is that right?
Yeah, I know. you
That's
you
like that's
you
like,
can you
like
can
a
come back a
built-in
few
customer.
times.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I met a guy. I was doing some shooting because I hadn't shot off the sticks for a little while, so I was doing some practicing before I came. I went to a friend of mine's place, and there was another guy there. He was a retired American Airlines pilot, and I met him. We became pretty friendly. And his father, or not, pardon me, not his father, his uncle, had left this guy with a fairly significant amount of money when his uncle passed away. And he said, his family members, he said he had no idea how nasty people could become. And so he was at home. He lives in California, and he got pissed off. He said he couldn't stand it anymore, so he decided, out of the blue, because he wasn't a hunter, that he was going to go hunting, and he was going to go to Africa to hunt.
Yeah.
And he went to Africa, and he spent, I think he said, almost 4 months there. First time ever. He'd never hunted before in his life. And he came back with, or shot 31 different species. I said, wow, what the hell? So he goes to Africa every year now and has multiple species that he gets, and he loves going, etc. So anyway, it's kind of interesting when I hear things like that.
Yeah, no, we're blessed in Africa with all the different species, and the beauty is all the species we hunt there is endemic to the area, so it's not even exotic or animals that didn't occur there previously. So yeah,
so the giraffe,
quite blessed.
that are there are endemic to that area.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
they actually do quite well in the Northern Cape. They browsers, so wherever there's trees and they survive.
It's actually, I guess maybe I paid a little bit more attention this time than I had previously, but it's kind of interesting. And maybe Pete talked about things, I don't know. But it was kind of interesting to see how the different animals graze, because if you pass by a sheep farm, for instance, which, as you well know, there's significant numbers of them, in the neighborhood, they eat everything off the ground, and the ground is absolutely barren. But with the species that are on your ranch or your property, these animals, they graze at different elevations, if you will. Some of them off the ground, some of them a little bit higher up, and then of course, the giraffe much higher up. So it's kind of interesting to see, because it never looks like all the food is being taken.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable, and beautiful to see how God created all the different animals and the different species. So you get browsers and grazers, and even when it comes to grazing, some animals like rhino and buffalo are bulk feeders, so they would take the long grass. And then you get, other species that eat the shorter grass, and species that would be grazing and browsing, like eland, and then obviously browsers of different sizes that can reach and eat different levels and different trees. Where you have, for instance, kudu feeding up to a certain height, and then giraffe eating, the higher trees, etc. Yeah. So all in all, you utilize much more of the bush and the grazing that's available, and you don't just, like with sheep, concentrate on one particular level or type of food.
Yeah,
So
because the
it's
sheep, obviously, what they have to do is they have to move them to a separate grazing area, after a period of time,
yes.
because they've eaten everything right to the ground.
Yes. So obviously, having wild animals is much better for the habitat again than, for other species like birds and, reptiles and insects and even plant life. Conservation is, to us, is not just protecting large mammals. It's looking at the habitat and the difference you make to the habitat for other species as well.
Well, from what I saw there, you've been doing a pretty remarkable job, and maybe that's to your point that that's God's animals, just the way they are. Because I never saw any area. Now, you've got 330,000 acres, so I'm pretty sure I was probably around much of it, but I didn't see all of it. But I
I
never
have to
saw
correct
one
you.
single area.
Sorry, I have to correct you. 33,000 acres, not 100,000.
Oh, 33,000.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
Apologies. But it was pretty interesting. But you said that the cost of the rhinos, and one of the things you weren't putting in there is I mean, you were talking really about the costs of protecting them, but you haven't even touched on the costs of feeding them, the cost of maintaining their health, the cost of watering them, and on and on and on, because those must amount to a tremendous amount as well.
Yes, yeah, eventually it all adds up, and unfortunately, the cost of owning a rhino is, like I said, more than what rhino is worth. So literally, they are now worth more dead than alive. Most private people can't simply afford to keep their rhino, and they have to either get rid of their rhino or see how they poached, and so the number of rhino owners have decreased over the last 10 years. I'd say more than half of the rhino owners that there were basically had to give up their rhino. That's why reserves like mine, have more rhinos, because I had to take in rhinos from um, my friends or people that I knew that wanted that couldn't keep their rhino anymore. Yeah, so yeah, it's tremendous. It's a long list, and so that's why it's so important to us that we get hunters over there, and we get hunters to spend their dollars, and in that way support and keep our conservation effort going.
But what's driving the poaching? I mean, you and I know, but I'm sure that our guests don't all know. So what's driving the poaching?
So the main driver is basically the medicinal use of rhino horn in traditional Eastern and Chinese medicines. Now, their medicine works different or their approach to medicine works different than ours in the West, where they make use of all sorts of, herbs and natural products in concoctions that people take. And it's a bit of a myth that rhino horn is only used as an aphrodisiac. It's used in different mixes, for fever and all sorts of things. So it's an age-old tradition. But now the problem is that because rhino horn is on Appendix 1, of CITES. You can't trade it for commercial purposes.
Sorry for interrupting. What is Appendix 1?
So that's the most threatened species.
Okay.
CITES, classify animals according to Appendix 1, 2, and 3, according to their, the way that they're threatened. So rhino is on the list of most threatened Appendix 1. So what it boils down to is you can't trade it for commercial purposes, and therefore there is no legal supply of rhino horn. And so you've got this demand, but no legal supply. So obviously, how that to feed that demand, it's going to go underground, black market, and eventually it's going to be sourced through illegal ways like poaching. And that's exactly what happened. So gradually the price increased over the last, 20, 30 years, to a point where it's approximately worth about $25,000 per kilogram. So if you take a bull rhino, will carry around 10 kilos. So you're talking $250,000 sitting on the nose of a rhino. So you can imagine it's going to get killed, and you need to really want to protect it, to keep it safe. So it's a big challenge,
Now, is there? I assume, and we talked about it while I was there as well. But I assume I shouldn't say assume. The market is not going to change. The Eastern medicine is going to use the rhino horn. Where it comes from is immaterial to the Eastern market. They're going to use it. So there is a market there for people like yourselves if you're allowed to sell it. But I'm not even sure that people like you and what's his name, Humes, and many others, I'm not sure that you even know if CITES was to lift the ban today, would you say, hey, I'm going to phone, Mr. Wong in China because I know he's a buyer. I'm not even sure that we know how to reach those people.
Yeah, look, at the moment, obviously, we don't have any connection or discussions with the users on the other side in the East, because everything is illicit. But I suppose if the so-called ban is lifted, I'm sure that most people in the East would rather want to acquire it legally than illegally. And because you can actually trim the horn from a rhino without the rhino being injured or harmed in any way, it's basically a renewable resource. Rhino horn is like it's keratin, so it's like your fingernails or hair, and it grows from the bottom out continuously. So rhino
sorry,
rubber,
Wicus, not necessarily like your hair.
Well, yeah.
So sorry,
not like my hair, but
because I have a good head of hair, I can have some fun with you.
Yeah, I know. Valid. Yeah, so it grows out like some people's hair.
Oh, perfect.
And they rub it and against trees, and they sharpen it and they use it as a tool to fight. So they break it and it constantly grows. So in the same way, humans can basically trim it, and it regrows. And if you trim it today, within say 5 years, it will grow out to the original length, and you won't even notice that it has been trimmed. So it's literally a renewable resource, and if we were allowed to sell it, we could at least supply that demand and undermine the root cause of poaching. One of the reasons why the price is so high is that there's a lot of speculation on rhinos going extinct. So people will buy rhino horn sort of in the hope that when rhino goes extinct, they will have something that could never be replaced and would be worth much more than it is today, even.
Well, I think that's the age-old thing with everything. I mean, you buy property in the expectation that it's going to appreciate in value significantly, and it's always a challenge to me. I look at the governments that are involved, and I for the life of me, I can't understand why they would not allow people like you to actually sell the horn, because it's a renewable resource. You're going to cut it, you're going to sell it, and 5 years from now, you're going to be able to cut it again from that same animal. Yet it makes no sense that CITES and I think as well the South African government doesn't allow you to just conduct business, because to me that kind of ends poaching, and that saves the rhinoceros, I believe.
Yeah, I know. It's all the leading conservationists and all the conservation economists agrees with us. But unfortunately, we're part of a bigger world where geopolitics and conservation politics play a big role, and there's always hidden agendas, etc. That's not necessarily the best for that species. And so, yeah, that's part of the fight that we're fighting, trying to convince more and more people that is the way to go. And, it's the old thing. If it pays, it stays, and in Africa, not only rhino, but all wildlife basically have to compete with other land users. People have a right to make a living off the land, and so if they can't make a living from wildlife, they're going to replace it with something else. Other form of land use like agriculture that they can make a living off. So we have to make a mind shift and understand that for wildlife, especially in poor continents like Africa, wildlife must be monetized in a way for it to stay. Because if you don't do that, it's going to disappear. It's going to be replaced by the cow or the plow, or something like that.
Well, Kenya is, I think,
Excuse
a
me.
perfect example. Kenya is, I think, a perfect example of that. Don't you think?
Absolutely. So Kenya banned hunting, I think, in the 70s. And at the same time, more or less at the same time, South Africa introduced the private ownership of wildlife. And so in that same period from there to now, Kenya lost more than 90%, I think about 95% of their wildlife, while in South Africa it increased by about 20-fold. So it just shows you, that if wildlife has got value and people can monetize it, people will look after it, and so in South Africa, most of the wildlife is owned by private people and private landowners, and we are by far the biggest custodian of wildlife in Africa. So it just shows you that you can't be blind to the fact that wildlife needs to basically earn its own keep. Excuse me.
I think that's one of the big things, though, because look, people have seen it from an agricultural standpoint the same, and I don't understand how they don't kind of grasp it, because in countries that have the ability to grow poppy for heroin or marijuana or
Yeah.
any number of illicit things, the local community is going to grow whatever they can grow to feed their families. So they'll do it illegally or legally. And I think most people would prefer to do things legally. and will only change to the illegal method if, in fact, they can't do it legally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's when there's a whole big debate around if there's if you should be for trade or against trade, but the reality is trade is happening. At least 1,000 rhinos uh, get gets poached, or sets of horn are illicitly smuggled out of Africa a year. And so trade is actually happening. It's just, are you for legal trade or illegal trade? So at the moment, it's all illegal, but if we legalize it, at least we can regulate it. It can be taxed, and the authorities would have so much more control over it. And that money can actually be utilized to protect the species instead of, at the moment, the species are going extinct as a result of it.
But I also think, Wicus, that one of the things that happens, and there will be always somebody, I think, that will continue to do whatever they can to save the species. But the vast majority of people that are supporting rhinos today, if they see that there's no end in sight and they're losing money hand over fist day after day after day, at some point in time they too have to say, you know what, I've done everything I can, but I can't continue to do this, because they're taking food off their own families' tables.
Absolutely, so that's why we in a race to get it sustainable. So we're trying through hunting, to make it sustainable. But the reality is, it's so expensive that if we don't get the sale of rhino horn, international trade in rhino horn legalized, we're not going to win the fight. And so I think the future for rhino is dire if trade in rhino horn is not legalized, and soon.
Yeah, no, I can see that, because if you just do the math, it's pretty simple. If let's assume, like today, because it's illegal, if it's 10,000 a kilo, that means the horn from a poached rhino is $250,000. Let's assume that it becomes legal, and for argument's sake, that drops to 125,000. Well, even at 125,000, that which is a fairly significant amount of money, how many hunters do you have to get in that your net proceeds from their hunt come to $125,000? You have to get a bunch of them in, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think on average, you can say the international hunters that come to Rockwood spend between, say, $10,000 and $20,000, say in the region of $15,000. So you have to get in about 10 hunters, or groups before you get to that amount of money. Now,
Yeah, but that's gross amount of money, not net amount of money.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so running my operation cost in the region ballpark of $1 million a year. So that's a lot of hunting. So even through hunting, we cannot sustain everything, and so I have to subsidize it privately, from other sources, my own money, and so if I can't afford to do that going forward until ad infinitum. So at some stage, I have to also get a lifeline, or stop doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I commend you and everybody that is supporting. But the reality is it will only happen for so long. So if there's not a lifeline prior to that, I think this species will disappear. I don't, I hope it doesn't. But if there's not a change in CITES, if there's not a change with the politicians, I think there's no way that it won't disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
It's
you're absolutely
a
right.
sad thing to say,
You know?
but it's reality. What do
Yes.
you say? What do you say? Because you know, we talked about it when I was there. I think that if we're ever fortunate enough to get somebody that is a non-hunter that actually listens to the hunting idea of conservation and what they do, I think that they will come away. They may not turn into hunters, but they'll certainly come away with the idea that these people are really, really good for conservation of habitat and conservation of wildlife. What do you say to people that go, yeah, right, hunters, and I say, yeah, right, as they roll their eyes? How is it that hunters actually are conservationists?
Well, if I think you're absolutely right there, that we need to do a lot of education and show people, how wildlife and conservation benefits from hunting. And it's one thing being told, and it's something else to experience it and to see it. And so at Rockwood, you can see how expensive it is. You can see the infrastructure. You can see the people, and you can get a feeling of that what it takes to protect these animals. And you also can look around and see, but this is not coming from falling out of the sky. Something needs to pay for it, and you can understand that hunters that come there and spend their dollars is basically the only source of income. So that's how hunting contributes economically to conserve species and especially in continents like Africa, to make sure that we've got habitat for wild animals. And so yeah, without hunting, wildlife will lose a lot of its economic value, and with the loss of the economic value, it will disappear, and the habitat that supports it.
Well, what about well, I think the other thing, I was going to just ask a question, but one of the other things that I believe happens is that if you look at, or I guess this is more a question, it's something that I believe pretty thoroughly in, is that the herds, whatever those herds are, whether they're the buffalo, whether they're eland, kudu, I don't care what it is, they also have to be, for lack of a better term, culled on a regular basis. It's healthy for the herd. If you just let procreation to go wild and nothing happens, then I don't think that's really good for the herd. So I think having hunting come to your place is beneficial for the rhinoceros, but it's also beneficial for the herds. If somebody takes these old, non-productive buffalo or whatever they are, that is good for the herd and good for that particular animal.
Yes, absolutely. So in general, trophy hunters, if I am allowed to use that term, or I'd rather use the term conservation hunters.
So would I, actually. So would I.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of trophy hunters in many non-hunters' minds says shoot something, chop its head off, and the rest goes to waste.
Yeah, but the reality is that it's a hunter that wants a animal, a older animal, and it's normally the older post-productive males, that's grown out, that's got the biggest, most beautiful trophies, and so taking that animal doesn't do anything to the genetic pool, and it's post production, so it's not, it's over its prime, so it can't compete to be in the breeding bull of the herd anymore. So now it's pushed aside. So you're basically not taking away any of the production or the genes that would have been available. It's already passed on. So in that way, you take a non-productive animal, but you get income for it, and that can support the upkeep of the rest of the herd. So um, um, and you give it a value way much more than just the meat value, because there's also a lot of hunters that purely just hunts uh, for sustenance and for meat, and trophy hunters generally pays much more than the meat value of that animal.
Speaking of meat value, though, you do some other pretty good things with the hunters that come there with the meat from their trophies, if you will, from their conservation efforts.
Yes. So I um, am am a I don't want anything to go to waste. So we process all the meat from the animals that's taken, and firstly, we've got about 40 staff members, so we feed the staff, and we utilize a lot of the meat for that, and also feed it to some of the hunters, and give them an experience of what wild game tastes like, and um, make them eat interesting things, as you would know.
Yeah.
But yes, we also support community projects. Feeding schemes at schools and at churches, and the protein that we get from those animals are it's valuable in a continent where there's a lot of poverty and a lot of unemployment, and protein is a scarce commodity.
Well, I know when we were heading back to Kimberley, Zeki came along with a nice big bag of meat too that he was happy to take home. And I know that children in the local preschool are, they get their regular proteins. So I look, I think everything you do is really great. I don't know, it's such a challenge. CITES is, for lack of a better word, is really a screwed up organization. I think it, in my opinion anyway, I think it had a good idea, but the thought to have a country voting on a species that they don't even have and don't know anything about is absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you look at uh, CITES in the name, to start off there, it's the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So it's a trade organizational convention. And it's turned into a conservation, um, or not even conservation, anti-trade, and animal rights, etc. Organization. It's not there to facilitate trade anymore, and so I think it's failing in its original mandate, and the reason why it's there. Yeah, so yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is, and that's why I think we need to educate and inform people so that the general public and also hunters know and understand the facts and can you know spread the message.
Well, I think you and I talked about it when I was there too. General hunters, I think not everybody gets it, but I think they're certainly willing to listen. But it's that massive group that's in the middle between way left and way right. So between the hunters and the people that will never, never, ever even think about hunting, those are the people, and I don't know how to get them. One of the ways that I that I've preached a lot about is there has to be emotional content to it. If there's no emotional content, if people are not emotionally engaged, then nobody cares. So somehow they have to become emotionally involved before I think much of anything happens.
Yeah, I think you're right, but also information and education is important, and I think the broader public simply don't have the facts and are not informed, and therefore they don't have an opinion, or they've got a anti-hunting opinion, but once they get the facts, most people, in the middle, as you described it, is generally people that's open, for conversation and yeah, will appreciate it if they get the facts and might just change their view on things. And that's why organizations like Dallas Safari Club and Safari Club International is so important, to educate and to get that message across, not only to hunters, but also to the broader public out there.
Well, I think that that's absolutely accurate. And I guess my part about the emotion is that if you give people purely statistical facts, those are just numbers on a piece of paper. But if you can tie those facts somehow to some emotional belief, then all of a sudden those facts are far stronger than just they would be by themselves.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. But we should obviously also be, um, how can I say, alluded to the fact that getting the emotion, like giving human features to animals like in Bambi and Lion
Yeah,
King,
yeah.
etc. Has done, I think, tremendous damage, and so the whole bringing emotion into the whole mix is important, but it needs to be done carefully, and I think, yeah, I agree, it's a good tool.
Yeah, well, I think it's a tool, and I think it's one of the things that we probably haven't done such a great job with. I don't think that you give them names or anything like that because, who wants to be noted for the person that killed Bambi? Nobody.
Yeah.
But at the same time, from an emotional standpoint, do people have any idea what a poached rhinoceros looks like? It's terrible. I mean, even the most diehard hunter would be embarrassed to see that and would never ever do it, where they just cut the face of an animal off to get 10 kilos of horn. But that's
Yeah.
reality. Or even these, because I've told people, they say, well, I think it's terrible that you shoot something. They've never seen a wild animal. Most people in the field have never seen how one of these older, unproductive bulls what happens to them with a lion or leopard or a jackal or any of these things, because they rip the skin off them while they're still alive for not just half an hour, but for hours and hours and hours. You know,
Yeah, no, you're
they
absolutely right. And I think touching on the emotion, we shouldn't forget the socioeconomic impact of conservation or hunting, and so seeing people um, getting opportunities, getting education, being able to provide for their families, advancing their lives, as opposed to people that don't have any income and that are forced to poach, or that don't have food, and don't have a future, and that's the opposites, and that's the difference that hunting can actually brings
yeah,
can bring to a continent like Africa.
yeah. Well, no, I agree with you. Vicus, I'm going to have to cut us off now. We've kind of reached our limit, but as I did when I was in Africa, I thoroughly enjoy our conversation. I hope we can support in any way we can. I'll come back for a visit, and at the very least, and add to my list of species for sure. But I had a great time when I was there. I had a great time chatting today, and we'll just do whatever we can to get the message out, because I think what you're doing is unbelievably valuable, and I certainly would like to make sure that, if at all possible, that I can hold my head up high and say, yeah, I've done what I can to save the white rhinos.
No, thank you very much for your support, and also for the chat tonight, and for helping us to spread the message. We won't be able to do it without people like you, and yeah, you are making a difference already. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. Vicus, it was great talking to you. Let's stay in touch.
All right. Good night.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.